We just finished out our very first year of homeschooling, our first grader, preschooler, and 1-year-old, and the consensus is that we did survive. But even though we survived, I definitely have a lot of thoughts about what worked, what didn't, the good, the bad, the ugly. So many of you asked for my final thoughts about our Heart of Dakota curriculum, have asked what I think about the Good and the Beautiful curriculum, so I thought I would just do a detailed video of my final thoughts for this year, the 2021-2022 school year, about our first graders curriculum and what we plan to do next year. So as you will see throughout this video, we did go with kind of like a boxed curriculum for our curriculum, but we did want to try out the Good and the Beautiful for both math and language arts. I just was really drawn to it for many reasons. That ended up being a lot of the reasons why we enjoyed them both, but just so you know, you can switch those out with the Heart of Dakota curriculum. You can pick whatever math or language arts you want. So for math, we went with the Math 1 level of the Good and the Beautiful's math program. It was recently updated and the consensus overall is that we love it. But let's dive into what was the good and what was the bad. The very good things about this, first of all, is that my daughter loved it. Now that's a huge thing. I think, especially being a former English teacher, I am confident that my kids will learn to love reading. But math, I feel like, is one of those things that kids just either like or dislike, and it means a lot to me that my daughter loves math to begin with, because if they hate math to begin with, it's less likely they're gonna like it down the road because it just gets harder. But I think a lot of that has to do with just how hands-on, beautiful, and fun this math curriculum is. We just love how it looks. First of all, it's just very engaging with the colored pages. I just think with math, especially in the young ages, you want it to be really engaging and you want it to be fun. And so I love that there are a lot of games in here, a lot of real world applications. That's something that's huge for me. I really want our math to be practical for my kids so they understand when they will actually use this kind of math. So I love that that is included in here. She learned about calendar work and telling time, counting money, that kind of thing. So she just learned so much this year. I really love with the changes that there's lots of diversity in here. You learn about people from all over the world and different ethnicities, different types of names, different skin colors, all those kinds of things were reflected in here, which I just think is a really great change. And then I just love how open and go it is. I just love that we can literally, I don't have to look at it the night before. It tells me exactly what to review if we need to review anything. And then it in blue says what I need to read to my child. And then in black says what I should actually say. And then you just work actually in the workbook. There's no separate workbook for this level. It's all one. So I just really love that. And then there's always a lesson that I would teach, and then there's independent review for her to do on her own. I would just kind of explain it all to her and then let her take 5 minutes to do it on her own. And I love that it's always reviewing the old concepts. So you're always spiraling back to that and then adding something new and then reviewing and then adding on. And it's just a great way to make sure they're building upon what they're learning and not forgetting things that they've already learned. And then I really love that at least the elementary ages, that their updated Simply Good and Beautiful math curriculum includes manipulative. So this one has a clock on the front, so we use this all the time. I love that it's wooden. This one had a whiteboard on the back, which was great for math, for word problems and things like that. And then it came with different tanagram shapes, coins, little boats that you use for a lot of different games and things, clocks with different times on them, a normal wooden die, and then a die that has left and right on it. So we were practicing that as well. These were used pretty much every single lesson. I just think this is so fun for especially younger learners to actually be manipulating things instead of just writing things out in a workbook. It just made it more real. So I really racked my brain trying to think of something bad to say about this curriculum. The main thing is the binding. I know with Math 2, which we did start on, which I'll talk about in a second, it has a completely different set of binding. I did not like the spiral binding. First of all, the back cover came off and I just could not get it to stay on. Some pages fell out and I just found it kind of annoying, but I do like that you can open it completely flat. I just think for a whole year, it would be really easy for a lot of the pages to go missing by the end of the year. So that's one thing. So a lot of things are up in the air for our family right now, just behind the scenes. So I don't really know for sure what's happening next year, but we do hope and plan to continue homeschooling. And I actually already bought the Math 2 curriculum, and we already started it because she finished the Math 1 a few weeks ago. And so we're just continuing with Math 2. We'll probably do it 2 to 3 days a week over the summer just to keep it going, but not as rigid as we do during the school year. So Math 2 is our plan for next year. This one has a much better binding, also comes with a box, and so far we are loving it just as much as Math 1. Next up, let's talk language arts and literature. We went with the Good and the Beautiful level K because she did public school for kindergarten, and with the pandemic and everything, I just feel like she didn't fully get through what this whole book contains. She was about probably a third to halfway through, you know, in her level. So we just started with this, and we're just going to keep continuing on. And so my thoughts about this, the Good, I love how open and go it is, just like the Math. You literally just open it up. It's got your lesson. You don't really have to do much to prepare each day, and it's colorful, engaging. I really like that it includes picture stories, and there are some faith elements, so obviously be aware of that. But I like that there were picture studies. We talked about shadowing and light and detail and landscape versus like a portrait and things like that, to really start to learn how to look at art and what goes into creating art. So I just really love that about it as well. And obviously the main purpose of this is to learn to read. And so my daughter is doing really well with that. She's progressed leaps and bounds from when she started, which is huge. And so that makes me feel really good that it actually is working. And then she really liked the word ladders, which we would practice every couple days. So it's got these little word ladders, and once she's mastered one, like you do it correctly 3 different times, you get to color in a certain part of a picture. So here's the picture. And that was just very, very motivating for my daughter to like earn a reward, I guess you could say. She just couldn't wait to finish coloring the picture, so it made it more enticing for her to practice these words. Because if I'm being honest, this was the subject she, I don't want to say struggled with most, it's just the subject she pushed back the most on, because it's hard. You know, you have to sound out words. Sometimes they don't sound like what you think they're going to sound like. You just have to memorize it. And that for her was really frustrating. So I just loved whenever there was any inclusion of something more enticing and interactive. So on the flip side of that, the bad with this for us personally, I wish it had been more engaging and there were more interactive things. I think with math, there's so many games, there's so many hands-on things. It would have been fun to have more of that in here. I know there was one craft we did, it was like a rainbow craft, and it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb because there were like literally, I don't think any other crafts like that. There were some activities where we would cut out like nouns and verbs and have to sort it, which she really likes doing. And I know with reading, obviously you have to read, and it's not always a super fun thing, but if they could have incorporated a little bit more fun, interactive things, I think she would have really loved that, especially like manipulatives with letters or something, which I know I could have added in. But this year was stressful enough, I didn't really even think of that till just now. So that's one, I would say, bad thing about this curriculum, is it just wasn't as engaging and enticing as the math curriculum. I also thought the amount of work between lessons varied significantly. There were days when a lesson would be like 5 minutes, and then there were days when it just like, there was so much to pack into one day that we had to break it up, which I know is totally fine. It just seemed like the amount of time spent and the amount of work in each lesson varied really significantly. So for me as a mom, I felt kind of like I was failing because we couldn't finish a whole lesson in one day, but I know that's really just a mindset thing. But it is something to be aware of, that not all the lessons are the same length, and some will take you longer than others. And then this curriculum also came with these mini books that you cut out, and I stapled them. And I think there's like 30 of them, and it tells you when to read them. And while I love the size of these and that she could independently take it and read it, I just thought it would have been so much nicer if these were in one book with like all the stories in one, so that it could all stay contained, because just organizing these, I sometimes couldn't find one because it had slipped under something else, because they truly are mini. They're like super small and I have them in one spot, but you know, with kids, sometimes things move around. So that is one thing I know with the level 1, all the readers are in one book. I would have preferred that for level K as well. So our plan for next year, and look at this, I don't like this binding already, it's coming off. So for next year, I already got, and we already started level 1. I wanted to not catch her up because I know these are kind of like this would be an advanced first grade, so since she's just finishing first grade, that's like the perfect time to start this. But just seeing level 1 and that she's going into second grade makes me feel like we're behind, but her testing said otherwise, so I feel okay about that. But we are moving right into this. These were 50% off if they're still available. They may still be 50% off because The Good and the Beautiful is redoing their language arts, which I think is a really good idea. It sounds like they're going to have some interactive things on the computer, which, you know, I personally would probably prefer it to be, you know, a tangible item, but I also think it's good for them to start to learn technology and how to use it. So I'm okay with that, and it probably will be really fun to be able to use like a screen for it. But I would say that's a really good change. So we're gonna stick with this. I may switch to I'll have to figure out where she would be because they're making it more on par with grades. So she might actually be in level 2 then. Not really sure. I'm gonna have to figure that out once they release more information on that particular level. But we are just planning to stick with this since it's been working, and she doesn't absolutely hate it. It's just not her favorite. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of the Heart of Dakota, Little Hearts for His Glory. It does not come like this, but I unbound the curriculum guide just to make it easier. I have a whole video on how I did my daily weekly binder so I could take these pages into a separate binder. I will link that below. But we did Little Hearts for His Glory for first grade. So you can do it for kindergarten or first grade. We decided to do it for first grade since it was our first year homeschooling, and just based on a lot of things I read, you don't want to get your kid too far ahead because later on some of the skills may be too advanced for certain guides. So that's why we did this. We kind of started on the later end for what this is for, but we absolutely loved it. So I'm going to go through different parts of this curriculum and what we liked, what we didn't, and make some suggestions if you're considering using Heart of Dakota, Little Hearts for His Glory. So first of all, the curriculum guide. The curriculum guide is honestly one of the huge things that sold me on this curriculum. I was looking at a lot of different box curriculum that pull from lots of different literature sources. I really wanted something literature based, which there are quite a few out there. I was definitely really looking at Sunlight, but honestly the curriculum guide and my brain just didn't work together. I wanted something I could just quickly look at and know what I need to do, and I just thought it was more confusing, where it would take me more time to actually figure out what to do next instead of just jumping in and doing it. And with 3 little kids, I want to be able to just figure out what I got to do and do it and not spend a lot of time figuring out what I need to do. So I love how this is laid out. There's color coding now in the curriculum guides, which I love. It tells you exactly what to read. There are different options as well for the different grade levels. So we went with the older first grade option, which I'll explain once we get to some of those books. And then, for example, since we switched out our phonics and math, I just didn't do those boxes, and we just use The Good and the Beautiful for that. So you can easily change and switch out anything. You can do different science. There's dramatic play, Bible study, so many different things in here, and it just was really super easy to follow. And what I really love about this is that you're not working just consecutively through a lot of the books. You're kind of jumping around like your devotional and your history books because it's all tied together. And that's what I really love. The creators of this really took a lot of time finding devotions that fit with your history, that fit with your verse for the week, that fit with your dramatic play and your science. So it all really weaves together to make a really well-rounded education, I guess you could say. So it all builds upon each other and they're not all separate things, if that makes sense. So I really, really love that. And then the only bad thing is that Heart of Dakota probably would get more customers if they changed their covers. I don't mind it. I think it's kind of sweet and wholesome, but I know it kind of made me go, huh, when I first saw it. But don't let a cover sway you. So when it comes to history, you're kind of using 3 different resources in one. You're using a Bible to take you through creation, through the New Testament, and then you're filling in other world history events and United States history with 2 other history books. So let's talk about the Bible. I got the more advanced Bible for older children. So this is 101 favorite stories from the Bible. And you read a lot of this in order, but you do jump around a little bit. And I loved this Bible. So I love that it's just 1 page of reading and 1 beautiful picture for every single day. So it can really help elaborate on the story to have the picture, and it's very detailed and realistic looking. And I love that it was written in a way that is probably a little bit more advanced for a first grader in some ways, but still able for them to understand the story, and it's way more advanced than like a super beginner Bible, which I think is good because they're pretty much beyond that at this point. I love that it says the Bible verses and chapters and books you're in, so if you want to expand on that, you can. And then there's always a verse and then some comprehension questions, which were super helpful to make sure they're understanding everything. The only thing I will say that I would be bad, I guess, is that I wish there was more about the New Testament. There's definitely a ton about Jesus's life, but after that, they don't really get into Paul very much, which I think could have really been a great teaching about the early church and how it spread and how he's persecuted and put on trial and all of that stuff. It very much so glosses over that. And I just think, you know, there's still a lot of New Testament stuff that I think just didn't make it in here that would have been helpful and would have made the Bible last longer throughout the curriculum, because once you're done with this, you move into the history stories. So I would have loved more of this, but obviously the main message that is important is, you know, the Old Testament leading up to Jesus, but I would have loved more of the stories from after Jesus died. So that then leads into these 2 books. There's History for Little Pilgrims. I believe this is a book you use regardless if you're in kindergarten or first grade, and it's a great overview, kind of beginner level textbook of creation through current day. And so there's pictures in here, there's these little timelines kind of showing you where you're at in the timeline. I loved, you know, there was not ever too much reading in here. It was usually just like a page each time, and it wasn't every single day. There's words to know, there's something to do if you want to expand upon what you read, and then there's a review, which is also great. And so it does link the Bible with other history, which I think is great because that's what we believe. What I liked about this is that it's very straightforward, very easy to understand, lots of pictures, it's sequential, so it's very easy to understand where you are in the timeline. The only bad would be that just that it seems a little old. I don't think my daughter cared, but and there's definitely been a lot that's happened since this was written that I think would be interesting to put in. I don't really know for a first grader how much they need to know about some of the more current events the last 22 years, but those really aren't in here. And then the other history book was History Stories for Children. This one's an interesting one. So there's these short chapters in here that kind of look like this. Some have pictures, some do not, and they're told in a very informal story type of way of writing, and they're usually like 3 to 4 pages. They do have vocabulary words, comprehension questions, and extension activities. My thoughts on this were, it was not my favorite. I liked that it was written in story form because it was more engaging to a first grader. I just thought some of the stories were like, is this really important? I guess it's fun because they're like actual stories of people, but also some of them just seem like kind of a waste of a few minutes when there were other important people that we didn't really learn about, and now we're talking about cloaks or things like that. I do think it paints a good picture of different time periods, but it just seemed kind of redundant sometimes. And then also some of the way of writing, it was kind of written like you're reading this aloud to a whole class, so it would, I don't know, kind of speak to the children, and it just was kind of weird sometimes, if I'm being honest. And then the curriculum guide has you kind of jump around in here, and I was myself kind of getting confused of where we're at because I figured this would be in chronological order, but then we would jump way ahead, then we would go back, then we go ahead again, and so I was just getting kind of confused of where we were actually at in history. So that's something to consider as well. I'm not a huge history person, so maybe that's why, but I liked it. It just wasn't my absolute favorite history book. And then another resource you use for like faith formation is this Devotions for the Children's Hour. I have kind of mixed feelings about this. So every page has a black and white illustration, and then there's usually like a question, or like, let me give you an example. So, may Christians do wrong things? Who is on the throne in your heart? How can you tell whether someone loves the Lord Jesus? So it does have very good, like I thought, very mature but still accessible questions for first graders. I thought it's a lot of questions kids might actually ask, and it's a good way of responding to them. And then at the end, there's usually a prayer, some questions, and there might be a hymn to sing. The good is that they're to the point. It's written informally, and it has really good actual real life type of stories to illustrate their point of like, this kid did this, and then he lied, and this is what happened, and he felt really bad. So it gives really good, it's not just talking general, it's actually giving specific examples, which I appreciated. But some of the bad was that it was definitely written, when was this written? So it was originally written in 1954, and that's definitely apparent. They refer to moms and dads as mother and father, and just some of the things they say, like I don't remember there being like anything racist or anything like that from what I remember, but it does have just language and gender stereotypes and stuff like that that definitely fit with the 50s that don't really fit now, but it can be a way to talk about that with your child. And I would just kind of adapt it as I was reading it, but it does have very good lessons. It does talk about some topics that, you know, you may not normally discuss with a first grader, but you know they may be thinking about or may question eventually, so you can just tackle it head on. So I did appreciate that, and I love how they weave it in within our story that we're reading, our history, so it really just drives the point home. And then we did the Hide 'Em in Your Heart CD to learn our verses, and I really like that there were a different verse. I think it's every 4 weeks we would learn each of the 4 weeks we would learn a new verse, and then after, I think on the 5th week, we would review those, so you're still adding on more. And I love the Hide 'Em in Your Heart CD because it's just a great way to remember the verse when you can put it to a tune. So that was great. I think my first grader thought it was a little cheesy at times, but what first grader doesn't think their parent is cheesy sometimes? So that's not really a negative about it. I personally find myself remembering the verses, so it definitely does a good job of that. And then when it comes to literature and story time, this curriculum uses the Thornton Burgess book. So basically like the adventures of Danny Meadow Mouse, Peter Cottontail, Reddy Fox, Grandfather Frog, Buster Bear, Chatterer the Red Squirrel, Jerry Muskrat. There are a whole bunch of them. And so these are basically your chapter books that you're reading aloud to your children for this entire curriculum. They do have a Beatrix Potter collection of stories in addition to that, but it's basically the same type of writing, same thing of personified animals, living their life and learning lessons through them. So that was the books we used. The good for these, we thought they were hilarious. My daughter just got super into them. She even made like a little landscape and would use different figurines to play the different characters and act it out. So I love that. She loves animals, and so this was a great choice for her. I personally, it's definitely written, you can tell it was written a long time ago, but I really like that. I think it was fun to read it, and I liked how kind of quirky it was, like speaking to the audience. And I like how at the beginning of every chapter it kind of reviews the chapter before, which can get a little redundant for an adult, but for a first grader I think that's a great skill. And I really like that they were short, so there were like 2 to 3 pages per chapter. A lot of times there were these little poems that the characters are saying, so they're hearing some rhyming, and there's definitely a lot of language in here that first grader, especially since it was written a long time ago, wouldn't normally be used to hearing, so it's great for vocabulary building. And there are tons of great lessons in these, especially Christian values and just values you want to pass on to your children about not being greedy, being humble, helping others, you know, safety issues because animals are trying to stay alive. And it was just really, really fun to put ourselves in the animal's shoes and think like, what would we do if we were in a trap? And to kind of guess what would happen next. It was a lot of twists and turns we weren't expecting. So I think she really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed reading them to her. They're very, very sweet. The only bad thing I can think of with these is that it was written a long time ago, so they do use words like the word queer, which I just would replace with strange, because that's how they were using it. Like, I saw a queer bird flying through the forest we had never seen before, and I would just replace it with strange, because that's what the author was intending for that word. And then I know the cat is named Black Pussy, and I just personally don't like saying that word, so I just changed it to Black Cat as I was reading. And I think it's pretty easy to do, and you kind of have to expect that when you're reading books that were written decades and decades ago. But the other thing with these, if your child does not resonate with these, just kind of hates them, I would maybe try out one before you buy all of them, because they're all very similar. They're all written in the same style. They all have characters you see throughout. They're all about animals. So, and all of the setting is the exact same. So if your child hates one, they're probably not going to love having to sit through like 8 more for a whole school year. But if they love them, then it can be a great thing to see this whole world be expanded upon. And I almost totally forgot about the handwriting and the logic and fine motor. So there's different levels for these, but for handwriting we did the manuscript A. So it's basically just what you would think of with handwriting. You're writing letters, you're writing words. A lot of them go along with different verses, and then you write the verse. These were great. My daughter usually did one whole page instead of, they're supposed to each be like a short little lesson. So she would just do the whole thing during nap. So she was very independent with this, which I loved. Very straightforward, not much to say. And then for the logic and fine motor, I love these. These are Rod and Staff books, and these are Going On Eagerly and Just Thinking and Choosing. So for these, it's a lot of like sequential things, trying to learn patterns, like what comes next, counting, tracing, a lot of like logic type of things. So I really like this. She enjoyed it a lot. I also had her do this pretty independently during nap time when her little sisters were sleeping. And this one's very similar. So these are really fun for kids. So this did not feel like learning to her. It just kind of felt fun. And there's a lot of like cutting out of things. So it's fine motor, figuring out where things go, like what things are connected. So it's just a great way to kind of fit in critical thinking and logic at a first grade level that they can do independently for the most part. So I really like those. I have nothing bad to say. I think they're like a great activity book that your kid can pretty much do on their own. So my final thoughts about Heart of Dakota, I loved it. I had a feeling I would love it, and I did. I love that I can change out things that aren't working very easily, and I love how easy it is to follow, but just how rich and deep you get into each topic and how you can always add more. It's just a very well thought out Christian literature-based curriculum I would highly recommend to anyone. I've been trying to get some of my friends to start doing it. So our plan for next year, if all goes as planned, we will do Beyond Little Hearts for His Glory, which is all about U.S. history. There are some amazing chapter books that are the read alouds that I cannot wait to read to my kids. And I love for those older ages, there are different ones to choose from. So if I continue with this curriculum for all 3 of my girls, I don't have to read the same books because they're all doing the read alouds with me. It's not like I'm reading aloud just to one child and the other one is somewhere else. We're all hearing the read aloud, so it will be nice. There's like the main pack you can get, but there's also girl interest and boy interest books. So we may end up doing all 3 because I think the boy interest ones would still be interesting for my girls. So we're probably going to get the original set and then add on the girl interests in the future if we do continue these curricula in the future. So that is a plan to do Beyond Little Hearts for His Glory, which is for ages 6 to 8. My daughter is 7. She'll be starting the school year at 7. She'll turn 8 in February, like right in between. So it's a great, still a great fit for her. I really wanted to do this curriculum this past year, but I really also just wanted to start slow and not get too crazy into it. And it's nice for her now that she had a whole overview of world history to now really dive in more closely to U.S. history. So that is our plan, to stick with the Heart of Dakota for most of our curriculum and then do the Good and the Beautiful for math and language arts. The one thing I am considering maybe doing different, we did do CC this year, and that was basically where we got our science, our art, public speaking. We just did that once a week, and so I just let that be our science and stuff, because we do learn a lot about science when we play outside and stuff like that. But I think if I'm gonna go, because we are not doing CC next year, just especially because we don't know exactly what this next year is gonna hold, I didn't want to sign up and then not be able to go. So we are planning to stick with Heart of Dakota, but I might actually purchase a separate science. I'm really wanting to do some science experiments, and while the Heart of Dakota does have some hands-on experiments and things you can do, I just kind of want something with more pictures and things like that, because it's very much like just stuff you have around the house and you're learning through that, which I think is beautiful and wonderful and a great, like, very Charlotte Mason way to go about science. I just kind of want something a little more, or at least to try that. So if you guys know of some science curriculum that are really engaging and also come with a set of experiments, let me know. I've been looking and I just really don't know what to choose. So let me know that, and I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you guys are planning for next year, what you did this year, what you liked, what you didn't like, and if maybe I got you into trying a new curriculum. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.